The 40K universe is absolutely massive, and even though humanity has spread out to over 1 million worlds, the vast majority of space still remains unexplored. There are literally billions of worlds that no human has ever set foot on, and for those individuals who are brave enough to explore them, they may just end up discovering some ancient alien artifacts of incomprehensible value. And as great as the rewards may be, the dangers are equally vast, as the galaxy is full of some insidious alien creatures, many of which we know next to nothing about. One such alien species comes from the little-known planet of Orn, a planet that was only visited one time before instantly being declared forbidden. Now, the alien species that call Orn home are simply known as species X-10198.RK. And their story is equal parts bizarre and tragic. So let's take a deep dive of the cryptic alien radiated rat people of Orn, a species that I'm assuming you've never heard of. But first, a quick word from this video's sponsor, and then we're gonna dive headfirst into the grimdark. Stay tuned. Manscaped is the leading provider of men's grooming and hygiene products across the globe. And fellas, listen, I know if you've never done it before, the idea of taking a razor down there is pretty scary, but Manscaped makes it safe and easy. The Perfect Package 4.0 comes with everything that you need to keep your standard issue equipment looking and feeling great. And the real star of the show is the Lawnmower 4.0. This thing works great and it's good for every part of your body. It's an advanced waterproof trimmer with advanced skin guard technology that helps reduce nicks and cuts. And a quick tip for my fellow Warhammer neckbeards: 2 fingers above the Adam's apple. That's your beard line. You're gonna wanna shave everything below that. Even if you don't have much of a jawline, it's gonna accentuate your good features. Common mistake is to go all the way to the chin. That's gonna give you a chin strap, and pretty much all that's gonna do is frame your double chin. I really wish somebody had told me that when I first started growing a beard, because I spent a long time looking real silly. The Perfect Package 4.0 also comes with a handy nose and ear trimmer known as the Weed Whacker. And honestly, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. It also comes with a full grooming set to get all of those tiny details. And I'm gonna be completely honest, I was not expecting to like this stuff as much as I did. It's called Crop Reviver, and it's basically balls cologne. It actually feels great and leaves everything feeling all nice and tingly when you're done manscaping. The kit also comes with 2 free gifts, including a pair of anti-chafe boxers. And I know the whole reason you're watching this is because you were hoping I was gonna model these bad boys off. And listen, I love you guys, but you're not getting that for free. For a limited time, if you use the promo code WESTHAMMER, you can get 20% off the Perfect Package 4.0. Just click the link down in my description and get yours today. Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video, and let's get into the grimdark. The Koronus Expanse is a dangerous and mostly unexplored region of space within Segmentum Obscurus. The Expanse itself is located near the very edge of the galaxy, near what is known as the Halo stars. These are the oldest stars that we know of, and beyond them is nothing but the cold, empty void. It is a bizarre realm filled with unimaginably fearsome xenospecies, most of which have gone undocumented by the scholars of the Imperium. It is a region of the galaxy that the Emperor in his Great Crusade never ventured into before the onset of the Horus Heresy. And because of this, it remains mostly uncharted territory, the Wild West of the galaxy, rife with unimaginable hordes of treasure and ancient alien archaeotech. Fame and glory await those that would be brave enough to explore its treacherous stars. There are a few warp routes into the Expanse, and the ones that exist are dangerous and unstable. But this has not deterred generations of rogue traders from braving the risks and venturing into its depths. If an expedition is successful, the relics and treasures they can uncover here can end up being beyond priceless. Not to mention the information they provide, including the charts of the explored areas, allow for the Imperium to gain a foothold on the planets that were charted out by these galactic pioneers. Through such efforts, humanity has managed to settle untold worlds within the Expanse itself. But no one would be so cocky as to claim that the efforts to conquer this place are in anything more than their infancy. For every single planet that mankind manages to settle on, there are dozens more that are under the control of voracious predators, cunning and brutal Xenos races, or the forces of the Dark Gods, who have been drawn to this place in search of unholy arcane secrets. Now, many of these worlds have only ever been visited by a single individual or a small group of people, normally staying on the planet's surface just long enough to determine if it's a viable candidate to be the home of a new human settlement, whether or not it contains any kind of valuable resources, or if it's a place that holds some kind of significance and requires further investigation. And other times, it is quickly determined that the planet is unbelievably hostile. Now, these reports often come from rogue traders, or a group known as the Disciples of Thul. Their claims and warnings of the hostility of these planets are oftentimes dismissed. These individuals will end up seeing the warnings as nothing more than a deterrent to turn away treasure seekers. Warnings that most of the time shouldn't have gone unheeded, and end up spelling the doom of any brave, or perhaps foolish, wayward adventurers that would journey to the planet's surface. One such planet is known as the World of Orn, and not to be confused with Orn's world, the homeworld of an abhuman race known as the Ratlings. Orn is a dangerous and bizarre world that is home to a particularly violent and mysterious species known only as species X-10198.RK. Very little is known about the planet of Orn, as the group that discovered it, the Disciples of Thule, made a single report before departing. They would end up marking Orn as Intransigent Omega, declaring that it served no value to mankind and that expeditions to its surface were forbidden. And this is actually rather strange behavior for Thule's followers, as like most members of the cult Mechanicus, traditionally, their reports are, for lack of better words, exhaustingly thorough. Now, the Disciples of Thule are an organization within the Calaxian Mechanicus, the name given to the cult Mechanicus organizations working within the Calaxian sector. The Disciples in particular seem to have a singular obsession with exploration. They believe that the eternal quest for knowledge is best pursued in the field, and thus with great reverence, they set out exploring uncharted worlds, their fleets disappearing for decades or even centuries at a time, with little to no contact. Their report states that they encountered a down Xenos void ship, massive in scale, and that it was infested with a strange, unknown alien species. Their servitors that they had sent down to investigate would end up sending back pic captures of the crash site. The ship's core structure was mostly intact, but there was many exposed areas and plenty of scattered wreckage, strangely enough indicating that the ship had crashed from a low altitude. The creatures that were infesting the ship seemed to be a hence undiscovered Xeno species. They were short and rat-like and displayed symptoms akin to radiation poisoning. Upon first glance, they were vaguely reminiscent of short bestial abhumans, bipedal and covered in fur, with elongated faces and huge ears. The places where skin was visible was also marked with deep scar tissue. They seemed unintelligent, but strangely, they treated the vessel with absolute reverence. Crude structures indicative of worship could be observed around the crash site. They would lovingly and tenderly carry pieces of the ship back and forth through its exposed walkways, almost as if they were mimicking something similar to the daily duties of a crew found on Imperial vessels. The level of veneration that the species seemed to display for their craft was also very similar to how the Mechanicus views machines in general. However, that is where the similarities end, as they seemingly lack the intelligence to utilize any of the ship's components properly. This was most apparent in the weapons that these creatures wielded, as they were actually advanced alien rifles. A fact that they seemed unaware of, as they wielded them more like a club than a gun. A deadly and incredibly complex piece of Xenos archaeotech that was now little more than a cudgel with which to bash in the brains of intruders. When the scout servitors were finally noticed by the group, one of them unleashed an ear-splitting war cry that whipped the rest of them into a killing frenzy. Hundreds, if not thousands, poured from the ship's interior and descended upon the helpless servitors like a horde of ravenous and voracious rats. And despite the fact that the Mechanicus has all but done away with the weakness of human emotion, whatever they had left of their stomach turned at the sight of the recordings, as the recording devices kept functioning long after the servitors had been completely ripped apart and consumed. And this is where that report ends. They simply state that it was abhorrent to human life and unwelcome to further investigation. And unless you and your crew are specifically looking to be eaten alive by irradiated ratmen, then you should avoid Orn at all costs. And then they moved on with their journey to document other worlds within the sector. Now, this report went unquestioned for a long time and served as a viable enough reason for Orn to be left alone. Adventure-seeking rogue traders out for fame, fortune, and glory ignored the planet, as based on those reports, a journey to its surface would be a waste of time and resources. There would be little to be gained and much to be lost. Now, the truth of Orn is far more bizarre and terrible, and the reality of what these creatures actually were was admittedly kinda tragic. You see, what the Disciples left out of their reports was that Orn's biosphere was unlike any that had ever been encountered before. It had some kind of weird effect on higher life forms, slowly degrading their neurological pathways over time. Those who stayed on the planet's surface for too long would have their mind degrade to the point that it was indistinguishable from that of a savage beast. Now, this would start off slow and probably would go unnoticed until it was too late. An individual's memories would begin to fade, becoming blurrier and blurrier each day. And then their cognitive abilities would start to falter. Things they had done hundreds, if not thousands of times before
becoming more and more difficult over time. When you're on Orn, you lose a little piece of who you are every single day, until one day, you look in the mirror and you can't remember who you're looking at. The species was clearly not native to this planet, and their purpose for coming here remains unknown to this day. Whether they were refugees fleeing from some far-off war from long ago, or maybe they were explorers themselves, or perhaps they sought to establish a new colony here. Whatever the case may be, by the time they realized what was happening to them, it was far too late. Based on the location of the crash site, and the fact that the ship was mostly intact, the disciples came to the conclusion that the creatures had tried to escape, but soon after takeoff, they realized that there was no getting away from their tragic fate, as the knowledge needed to operate such a vessel had been completely lost. The ship would then crash back down to Orn's surface, breaking apart and thus destroying their one chance to escape. The survivors realized that their only hope was to repair the ship and find a cure, and thus desperately and frantically began trying to put the pieces back together. All the while, their minds becoming more and more corroded, until eventually, all that was left of this once noble species was nothing more than feral beasts, designated as species X-10198. And now, after an undeterminable amount of time has passed, these creatures still carry out patterns of behavior similar to those that must have been displayed in the days before their minds became completely lost. Each of them shuffling back and forth amongst the debris of their ship, desperately trying to fix the vessel that would deliver them salvation from this terrible world, yet not knowing what that even meant, or why they do the things that they do. They knew enough to know that their ship was important, and that their survival depended on it for some reason. Their primal instincts pushing them to forever stay close by and defend it to the death. That their continued existence completely depended on this, but they couldn't remember why. It's impossible to determine what xenospecies these creatures originated from, and we don't know if it's one that was known to the Imperium or if they were a completely undiscovered alien race. But it's also very probable that they are the last of their kind, a sad end to a demonstrably great alien species, as they were capable of space travel. Whether or not their mutant-like appearance is part of their original biology, or this is in part due to Orn's twisting atmosphere, still remains unclear. Another possibility is the fact that the ship is giving off a dangerous level of radiation, and generations of exposure to it seem to have rendered these creatures immune, though it's very possible that the radiation has played a significant role in their current state. When hunting, species X-10198.RK is incredibly fast and hyper-aggressive, and they're able to locate the exact position of their prey through an enhanced sense of smell and their large ears that are able to detect even the faintest of sounds. Their minds are so degraded that when provoked to fight, are said to be a blinding flurry of pure hatred. They have no regard for their own life and will continue to throw themselves in waves at the target. They rip and bite and tear at living flesh, pulling their victim apart and consuming them while they are still alive. One depiction of an attack by this species comes from a rogue trader and a member of the Disciples of Thol. The disciple believed that Orn still had something to offer the Imperium, and he could prove that mathematically his colleagues had been incorrect to dismiss it. And even though the member of the Mechanicus' servitors were equipped with a lot of heavy weapons and were able to absolutely butcher the oncoming horde, the species didn't care. Even though corpses were piling up all around them, they kept on coming. At one point, one of the rogue trader's heavy gunners ended up having a weapons jam, and in that moment of hesitation, the species completely descended upon him, tearing him apart and pulling him off into the trees in sections. We probably will never find out the origins of species X-10198.RK. They exist now as a cautionary tale of what can happen when you venture too deep into uncharted space. By all accounts, they are still out there in the jungles of Orn, desperately being driven on by a primal instinct passed on to them by their ancestors. An instinct that tells them they need to escape their species' tragic fate. The ship they venerate is the key to their salvation, that much is clear to them. But without the knowledge to repair it, or even understand what a ship is, they are doomed to remain trapped here, unaware of who they are, where they came from, or perhaps, mercifully, what they have become. The planet of Orn still receives visitors. Rogue traders, pirates, and other wayward adventurers will end up journeying here from time to time. But few ever leave. Their ultimate fate remains a mystery. But perhaps they still live on, doomed to forever roam the jungles of Orn as a new pack of feral and deranged monsters.